Deep inside a piece of stone that has been sitting in the ground for millions of years, there is a shape that looks like it belongs on a planet in a different galaxy. This thing has no face, no legs, and it doesn't even have a clear front or back, so it looks more like a strange fossilized fingerprint left behind by an alien than a living animal. For over 100 years, the greatest minds in science have been debating what this creature actually was, wondering if it was a jellyfish, a giant worm, or perhaps just a failed experiment of evolution that didn't quite make it. The truth is that becoming a fossil is nearly impossible, because to turn into stone, an animal has to die in the perfect spot at the exact right second to be buried instantly and escape rotting long enough for minerals to replace its flesh. About 99% of everything that has ever lived on Earth vanished without leaving a single trace behind. But every once in a while, the Earth decides to keep a secret for us to find. Today, we are peeling back the layers of time to find the weirdest extinct creatures ever discovered, and by the end, you'll realize that Earth's past wasn't just a little bit different, but was actually a science fiction movie that really happened. "500 million years ago, we were able to see this soft-bodied shape that doesn't have 2 eyes like a fish, or even 8 like a spider. This creature has 5 eyes, and all 5 of them are staring in completely different directions at the same time, which is already enough to give anyone a nightmare. But then it gets even worse because a long, flexible tube grows right out of its face like a vacuum hose, and at the end of that hose is a serrated claw. This was Opabinia, a creature so strange it barely resembled anything alive today. Measuring only about 2 to 3 inches long, 5 to 7 centimeters, it was surprisingly small despite its monstrous appearance. Its body featured 5 eyes clustered on its head and a long, flexible, claw-like proboscis extending from its forehead. Opabinia lived during the Cambrian explosion, a wildly experimental period in Earth's history when evolution rapidly produced bizarre new body plans. It used that flexible frontal appendage to snatch prey and guide it into a mouth that faced backward beneath its head. Nothing alive today truly resembles it, not in structure, not in symmetry, and certainly not in overall design. When Hallucigenia was first identified, it didn't resemble any known animal. Its appearance was so strange that it seemed almost unreal, which is exactly how it earned its name. The fossil revealed a thin, worm-like body lined with long, needle-sharp spikes on one side and soft, wiggling tentacles on the other. For decades, the spikes were interpreted as stilts, leading to reconstructions that showed the creature walking across the seafloor on rigid, bony supports like some kind of nightmare ballerina. Only later did further analysis reveal that the fossil had been interpreted upside down. They had been looking at the entire animal upside down the whole time. Those stilts weren't legs at all, but were actually massive armor spikes on its back, designed to impale anything that tried to eat it, while the tentacles were feelers on its back were the actual legs. For decades, one of the strangest animals in history was being studied completely backwards. But Hallucigenia wasn't just an enigma, it was also a victim, because in this prehistoric world, there was a predator so large that even armor spikes couldn't save you from being eaten. Long before the great white shark became anyone's nightmare, and millions of years before Tyrannosaurus rex even existed, a predator called Anomalocaris patrolled the ancient seas. At first, its fossilized body parts were found separately, grasping claws, a strange circular mouth, and other fragments that didn't seem to belong together. Only later did it become clear that these pieces were parts of a single animal. Anomalocaris measured about 3 feet long, nearly 1 meter, enormous for its time, and likely weighed around 20 to 30 pounds, 9 to 14 kilograms. In the Cambrian oceans, that made it a true giant. It had massive, compound eyes with thousands of lenses, giving it exceptionally sharp vision. At the front of its body were spiked, flexible appendages used to seize prey, guiding it towards a circular mouth lined with serrated plates resembling a pineapple ring edged with teeth. Living more than 500 million years ago, before fish had even evolved jaws, Anomalocaris stood at the top of the food chain. It cruised through prehistoric reefs like a living torpedo, proving that even in Earth's earliest complex ecosystems, dominance belonged to the largest and most efficient hunter. Now we go back even further to a time before there were even eyes, teeth, or claws, which is known as the Ediacaran period. And it is honestly the worst nightmare still unknown in history. Here we find a creature called Dickinsonia that doesn't look like an animal, but looks more like a flat, ribbed oval or a quilted blanket made of flesh that was pressed into the stone. For 75 years, it was the ultimate biological mystery, because scientists couldn't decide if it was a fungus or a giant single-celled blob. Then they found what they call chemical ghosts deep inside the fossil, where researchers discovered traces of cholesterol. Since cholesterol is only found in animals, we finally have the proof that Dickinsonia was likely one of the very first animals to ever exist on this planet. But the real, absolutely amazing factor is that it has no head, no tail, and no mouth. So it represents a lost version of life that acted as a prototype that the Earth tested for millions of years and then completely deleted from the record. In 1958, an amateur fossil collector in Illinois split open a piece of shale and uncovered one of the strangest creatures ever found, the Tully Monster. Officially known as Tullimonstrum gregarium, this animal lived about 300 million years ago in ancient Carboniferous swamps. Most specimens measure between 4 and 14 inches long, 10 to 35 centimeters, roughly the length of a banana, making it small but no less bizarre. Its body was torpedo-shaped, but the eyes weren't located on a typical head. Instead, they sat at the ends of a rigid horizontal bar that stretched across its body, and it didn't have a conventional mouth. Extending from its front was a long, flexible trunk that ended in a tiny claw-like structure lined with teeth. For decades, its classification has remained fiercely debated. Some anatomical studies suggest it was a vertebrate, possibly related to early fish, while other chemical and structural analyses argue it was an invertebrate with no close modern relatives. Each new study seems to challenge the last, leaving the Tully Monster as one of paleontology's greatest unsolved mysteries, a creature that still resists a clear place on the tree of life. For over 100 years, strange spiral-shaped fossils were discovered in desert rock formations, looking like tightly coiled stone saw blades. At first, they were mistaken for the shells of ancient snails, but they weren't shells at all. They were the teeth of an ancient shark-like predator called Helicoprion, a creature that carried a literal spiral blade inside its lower jaw. Helicoprion lived around 270 million years ago and grew up to 20 to 25 feet long, 6 to 7.5 meters, about the size of a modern great white shark. It likely weighed well over 1,000 pounds, 450 plus kilograms. Unlike modern sharks, which constantly shed teeth, Helicoprion's teeth remained anchored in place. As new teeth formed, the older ones were pushed forward and curled inward, forming a tightly coiled, razor-edge spiral, sometimes more than a foot across. This wasn't decorative. When it bit down, the spiral rotated backward into the jaw, slicing through soft-bodied prey like a biological buzzsaw. Instead of simply biting, it functioned like a built-in cutting machine, shredding fish and squid in a single motion. Far from being an evolutionary mistake, Helicoprion was remarkably successful. It dominated ancient oceans for millions of years, proving that even the strangest anatomical designs can thrive, at least, until the world changes and evolution moves on. Not all of the strangest creatures in Earth's history lived beneath the ocean. Some of them walked on land, towering above everything around them. When paleontologists first uncovered fossils of a dinosaur called Therizinosaurus, they didn't find a skull or spine. Instead, they found enormous claws measuring over 3 feet long, about 1 meter, curved like gigantic biological scythes. At first glance, those claws seemed to belong to a terrifying superpredator. But when more complete skeletons were discovered, the full picture was far stranger. The Therizinosaurus stood roughly 16 to 20 feet tall, 5 to 6 meters, when upright, stretched about 30 feet long, 9 meters, and likely weighed around 5 tons, about as heavy as an African elephant. Despite its intimidating size and weapons, it wasn't a carnivore. It had a pot-bellied body, a long neck, and a small head filled with flat, leaf-shaped teeth designed for stripping vegetation. Those massive claws weren't built for slashing prey, but for pulling down tree branches and gathering plants. The scythes were feeding tools first, and defensive weapons second. If a predator approached, though, those meter-long blades would have been more than enough warning. The Therizinosaurus didn't need to chase anything. It simply had to exist. A 5-ton, scythe-handed giant that preferred salad but looked like something designed for war. Long before the first dinosaur ever took a breath, the world belonged to a group of creatures known as the synapsids. They weren't dinosaurs, and they weren't quite mammals either. They were something in between, early relatives of our own lineage. Some species were small, no bigger than a modern house cat, while others grew enormous. Dimetrodon, for example, stretched over 10 feet long, 3 meters, and weighed as much as a large wolf, while later mammal-like forms such as Cynognathus reached nearly 4 feet in length and resembled muscular reptilian dogs. These animals often had the sprawling body of a giant lizard, but faces that looked strangely mammalian with differentiated teeth, possible whiskers, and in some later species, even patches of fur. The most unsettling detail is inside the mouth. Instead of rows of identical spikes like a crocodile, they had specialized teeth like ours, sharp canines for tearing and flat molars for grinding. Some of these so-called lizard dogs may have been warm-blooded, active hunters, or omnivores. They represent the true evolutionary bridge between reptile-like ancestors and the mammals that would eventually dominate the planet. Looking at a synapsid is almost like observing an early evolutionary blueprint of mammals, because without these strange survivors enduring the greatest mass extinction in history, humans would never have existed. We are the descendants of the lineage that survived when nearly everything else disappeared, and that leads to a deeply uncomfortable truth about how evolution really works. "300 million years ago, the air itself was different, containing up to 35% oxygen, far higher than today's 21%. In that supercharged atmosphere, the normal biological limits didn't apply. Insects didn't just grow slightly larger, they reached astonishing proportions. This is where we meet Meganeura, a giant relative of modern dragonflies. It had a wingspan of nearly 2.5 to 3 feet, 65 to 75 centimeters, about the size of a large hunting hawk. Its body alone measured over a foot long, 30 plus centimeters. Imagine a dragonfly the size of a bird of prey, buzzing through ancient swamp forests, its wings beating with a deep mechanical hum. With that enormous wingspan and lightweight body, Meganeura was likely capable of flight speeds approaching 30 to 35 miles per hour, 50 to 55 kilometers per hour, comparable to some modern dragonflies, but scaled up to terrifying size. In a world without birds, it dominated the skies. It could snatch small amphibians, early reptiles, or large insects with powerful spiny legs and vanish in seconds. But Earth changed. Oxygen levels gradually dropped, and the dense air that once supported these giants thinned. Large insect bodies, which rely on passive oxygen diffusion, could no longer function efficiently. Gigantism became a liability. Over millions of years, natural selection favored smaller, lighter forms. The dragonflies in your garden today, delicate, fast, and palm-sized, are distant echoes of those prehistoric rulers of the sky. There is an incredibly unsettling part to this entire story that actually keeps paleontologists awake at night, and it involves the thousands of fossils sitting in museum drawers right now that nobody can classify. They are completely lost because they found strange shapes in the rock without even knowing where the mouth of the animal was located. Some footprints that defy every known animal on record, yet we have no idea what kind of creature actually made them. The history of Earth is like a 1,000-page book, where 999 pages have been ripped out and burned, leaving us to figure out the whole story by looking at a few random sentences on a handful of torn pages. Most of the truly weird life, like the soft and delicate jelly-like things that lived in the dark, never actually became fossils because they didn't turn to stone and just melted away into the silt. This means the weirdest creatures to ever walk, swim, or crawl across this planet were likely things we will never see, never name, and never even be able to imagine. We aren't looking at a complete history of life, but are instead looking at the tiny scraps that were lucky enough to survive the passage of time. At this point, you really have to ask yourself why the past was so incredibly weird, and why nature ever thought a five-eyed shrimp or a saw-toothed shark was a good idea in the first place. The answer is actually quite simple and a little bit terrifying, because the truth is that evolution doesn't have a plan. Nature isn't a master architect working from a perfect blueprint, and it doesn't know that it's eventually trying to make a human, a dog, or a bird. It is just an endless, messy, and often random experiment where the rules are made up as things go along. During times like the Cambrian explosion, the genetic gates were kicked wide open, and nature acted like a mad scientist with a blank check. 5 eyes, circular saw teeth, spikes for legs, and mouths located on the ends of long trunks. A laboratory where the rules of survival didn't exist yet, and the world we see today only feels normal, because we are looking at the winners of that long-lost game. We are looking at the few designs that didn't fail or break, but for every animal you see at the zoo today, there were once 1,000 weird versions that just didn't make the cut. Every fossil you've seen today is more than just a piece of bone or a shell. They are messages and transmissions from a world that died a very long time ago. When we look at these strange and twisted shapes in the rock, we aren't just looking at the past, but are actually looking at alternate versions of Earth. We are seeing what life looks like when it is allowed to experiment without any limits or rules, and certainly without us being around to witness it. The Earth has reinvented itself over and over again, and while we like to think of ourselves as the main characters of the story, the truth is that we are just the latest chapter in a very strange book. That book is mostly unwritten and hidden away from us for now. Somewhere right now, buried deep inside a mountain we haven't climbed yet, or hidden on a seafloor we haven't mapped, fossils are waiting for us to find them. These creatures are even more alien and more impossible than anything we've shown you today, and they are just waiting to be discovered. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into Earth's forgotten worlds, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more ghosts in the stone, and we're just getting started.